unless you're already an established player and you have skill, APA is the best place to start.
Probably least intimidating.
Well, their handicap system makes it the most welcoming for a new, lower skilled player, I feel like.
I don't think that's what sets it apart for me. What sets it apart for me is that it's not as serious competitively as other leagues.
Correct.
So much of our discovery and growth as players takes place outside of the box, simply by taking the time to chat with fellow players on all things pool. And that is why we created the Seeking Gravity Square Table Discussions. On this episode, we break down the most popular leagues available in most areas, along with their differences, so you can gain more insight into what leagues may fit better for you before having to jump in. With all the different kinds of leagues and the formats, it can be kind of confusing for players, especially if you haven't played any leagues, but maybe you've played one and you really want to know how your current leagues differ from all the other ones and the pluses and the minuses that go along with that. So I thought we could kind of tackle those. So the ones we're going to tackle today that are on my list are APA, BCA, UPA, and TAP. I think that's all the proper...
All the acronyms.
Right.
So let's start with I feel is the low-hanging fruit, and that's APA. And I really want to be able to take this conversation wherever you guys feel it can go, but I think one of the things that we should cover in each one of these is the overall format, the games that are available, how those games are played in terms of how they score them, the team size, how long a league night takes, things like that. So does anybody want to take a crack at APA?
Describing it?
Yeah.
That's a big...
Would you consider, let's do this. Would you consider APA the most friendly entry level?
Absolutely.
Who here was APA the first league that they played in? Is that everybody?
No.
Of course, Jeff, you gotta be the outlier.
I gotta be different.
So did you ever play APA?
I did.
But it wasn't the first one?
No, VNEA.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So APA is typically, I feel, the first league that most new players are introduced to. Did you guys say so?
It's kind of going away from that a little bit, but I still think it's probably the best league for a brand new player that doesn't play league. Unless you're already an established player and you have skill, APA is the best place to start.
Probably least intimidating.
Well, their handicap system makes it the most welcoming for a new, lower skilled player, I feel like. Like you feel more like you have a chance, I guess.
Okay.
I don't think that's what sets it apart for me. What sets it apart for me is that it's not as serious competitively as other leagues.
Correct.
Every other league, with the exception of APA, is much more competitive. You have players that want to win more than APA.
Typically, the APA was built for friends putting a team together, going out and playing, right?
More of a social.
More hanging out and stuff like that, right?
And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's
No,
why
yeah,
I see
definitely.
that league. It's a social pool outing.
Yeah.
It's hanging out, having a couple beers, and we're playing some pool, rather than the other way around.
Right. Right.
So, but I feel that it's a really great entry point. I probably wouldn't have got into leagues if it weren't for the APA, if that makes sense. So I think like most people, they probably never even played pool before, and somebody cons them into going like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow night? Do you like to play pool? And it's like, no, I don't. And like, well, you should just come and do it. And I feel like most APA teams has one or two players who kind of we're in that area.
Situation. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
So 8-player roster, 5 are going to play that given format. In APA, depending on where you're at, they will offer 8-ball, 9-ball, or the option of doing what we call double jeopardy, which is playing both formats, which is the format when I played is the one I preferred because there's just a lot more going on. When you have 5 matches of each, you got more likelihood of playing and maybe even playing both, depending on how many of your teammates showed up.
Yeah, I mean, and ideally, the double jeopardy, you have an 8-man roster. Now, at least all 8 people on your team are going to likely have a chance to play, not just sit there all night, and allows you to still have all 8 people there every night and be like, okay, you'll play this side, you play that side, what have you. Yeah.
And then APA's got what they call the equalizer system. It's a handicapped league, so they're going to rank you on skill level 1 through 9, depending on
9-ball.
Yeah.
1 through 7.
Yeah, 9-ball's got a different rating system than 8-ball, which makes it that much, more confusing. And then depending on how you sit the various skill level player that the other team throws, there'll be a different race potentially in 8-ball. In 9-ball, it's kind of weird, the fact that it's scoring just balls, right? So if
Points,
you're certain, if you're a certain skill level, you have to sink a certain number of balls, which equate to points, before your opponent sinks their required amount of balls.
Correct.
That's probably one of the things that makes APA League stand out the most from any other league is that 9-ball format.
Yeah, it's very unique. Yeah. And it's a weird thing to get used to if you're used to playing 9-ball before going into that, because that's not really how 9-ball works, right? 9-ball is usually about the 9-ball. That's the key ball, right? Where there it's just, it's a sweetener because it's a 2-point ball, but at the same time it's not like a game winner or anything.
Yeah, right. You get 2 points. They
well,
run
and
out
you
the
get
other.
break, so if you have a good break, it's more than 2 points. It's
could be
potential. I don't mean the ball is more than 2 points, but the sequence.
It changes the aspect of the game sometimes when, you could be shooting an early 9. You're like, do I really even want to shoot an early 9? Yeah. Why wouldn't I just run out these 4 balls? Because I'm going to get more points.
Exactly.
Even if the 9's hanging in the pocket.
Right.
That's a really good point, that you're not playing shape like a proper 9-ball player would, because you're just you look at the table, you see points. You don't see really defense necessarily. You just find the way to do the best point grab that you can and then lay up if you have to. So APA not only has the skill ranking, but they also have what they call a skill cap. And for the 5 matches you play that night, you have to stay within a certain threshold. And so that's going to create a lot of strategy for who you, what we call throw a player in a match, and how many good players you can throw. So if you have a lot of strong players, you also have a couple newer players who don't rank nearly as high, to kind of stay under that skill cap.
Offset it.
Yeah.
And that whole thing is, honestly, I think, built to grow leagues as well. Because as your players get better, those teams inevitably can't stick together because they can't play a roster of 5 people under the cap. So those teams separate and create more teams, which builds the league, right?
Yeah. I think we all have our suspicions. The APA has kind of designed a system with the skill cap, especially
to build the league.
Yeah,
right? And I don't think it's just APA.
Yeah, but I think in terms of the leagues that we're going to talk about tonight, that's probably the one that's most sensitive to requiring as players grow in skill level. They eventually have to fragment and start new budding teams, and maybe
or bump up and go to a different league that's for the higher rated players.
Yeah. Right, because you get these teams that are family or close friends, and they always intended to play together. And they grow as players, and now they can't play as a team anymore. So then they're either forced to separate into teams, or like Jeff was mentioning, sometimes you just leave that league and go to a league that can accommodate higher skill level players.
And I don't think that point could be overstated enough, because I feel, aside from one league I've played in, that has been the reason why I've terminated my participation in all the leagues that I have left, is because you get together, and again, especially if your roots are in APA, it was more of a social thing. It was more of a fun thing, and then as you grow as a player, you really learn a love for the game, and you want to expand that. But you don't necessarily want to say goodbye to all these people you've been playing with for potentially. Some of these people have been playing together for decades. Like, it's been a thing, right? So it's a really kind of bummer element to it, is that you have to fragment these people you love to play pool with, and sometimes that's just a deal breaker for some people, and that's ultimately like, well, I'm sure we'll get to that. Julietta her and I have been on a couple teams that have had to fragment because of that challenge, and we just instead of us going our separate ways and making new teams and then having to face each other on the pool table, we said, we'll go ahead and move on to the next league and whatever can accommodate our team.
It also depends on the players too. You got a player of one caliber that wants to get really good at the game, right? So then when he gets to that level, or she gets to that level, then that's when they're going to move on, right?
Yeah.
So, APA is built for that camaraderie for the new players, but then you might have that 1 or 2 person on the team that they want to get better, where the other ones just want to hang out and have fun.
Yeah.
You know, so it just depends on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's not saying if you're not growing as a player, it's bad. There are some people who will be lifelong 3s and 4s, and that's what they want to do, and that's awesome. It's just a fun night for them, right? A lot of people, it's their night away from work or get away out of the house for them just to kind of decompress.
Yeah.
Oh, really quick, let's talk about the postseason option. I think all the leagues kind of differ in a sense what it offers if your team does well, right? So
what are they offering for the competition, right? For winning.
Yeah, so one of the big things with the APA is that if you do well, you go to playoffs for that season, that session, I think they call it. And then if you do well there, then you go to, is it a regional?
Right. A local regional.
Which is usually once or twice a year, depending on the format, right?
Once.
It's once here.
For each
teams. For teams, right?
Once for 8.
Oh, sorry, not talking about singles at all.
Yeah,
that's a different event.
Yeah, which we should probably bring up too. But yeah, so it's a one-time event, and if you do well there, then you go to the big show in Vegas, where if you haven't experienced it before, it's quite a treat to go to Vegas and walk into rooms where there's 300 or 400 pool tables. It's kind of, if you've never seen it before, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
And with that trip to Vegas, at least in the APA, all these leagues will be different, but in the APA, your league operator is going to give you some compensation to assist in that trip to Vegas, right? They're not going to pay your whole way, but they're going to help financially with the cost to go to Vegas and play that tournament. That's the big move for APA is that Vegas trip that's your ultimate goal, because the session payouts are pretty small. You're not playing to win money every session when you play APA.
Yeah.
The first place and second place team get money, and everyone else gets like
pat on the back.
No, you get like a small amount that covers.
You get a week's league fees.
A week of exactly.
Yeah, back. Right.
So if you come in first or second for the session in points before the playoffs, you get a payout.
Yeah, and a pretty small payout.
I don't remember what it is because I don't think our team.
And it would still cover, even if you, I think, did first place, I think it would cover like half of your session fees or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't think it's much.
Too bad.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's a nice little thing, but again, it's not like the other leagues. I think it's on the lower end of the compensation.
Well, also because you're dividing it between 8 people instead of 4.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
So to kind of recap, I think the other element that kind of rolls into this topic of you can have an 8-player roster, 5 are going to play that matches that night for the given format. You might not know when you're going to play that night. You might play match 1, and that's going to be determined whether your team throws first or the other team throws first, and you're going to try to, ideally, I think the sportsmanship way is you try to best match this skill level. That's a whole different topic.
That's a whole other animal.
We don't need to go down that rabbit hole of the tactics that can go into that handicap situation. But you can show up to play at 7 o'clock, and you might not be pulling a stick out of your bag till 11.
Yeah.
And not knowing if you're going to play match 1 or match 5. And you can have quicker nights, but I would say on the average APA is going to be one of the longer nights when we're talking about the lens of all the leagues that we'll be addressing tonight. So I would say the average night ended to be safe, 11:30 to midnight, something around there.
Right.
I know when I played
start times.
Yeah, I know when I played that's what it was.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to really cover this. Is there a certain kind of speed of player that you think that this league's best suited for or not suited for?
Rating wise?
Sure.
So probably 6 and below.
600 and below would be like, you would like APA?
Yeah, APA anywhere, 2 to 6. Yeah. When you start getting to a 7 or a 9.
No, I'm sorry, were you abbreviating Fargo numbers or skill levels?
Skill levels.
Okay.
Skill levels. So APA's 7 is the highest, and 9 is the highest in 9-ball, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a 5 or a 6, I mean, depending on what you're looking at, 5 or 6, if they want to get better at the game, they're going to move up to a harder league, right? A 5 or a 6 that is okay playing with their friends and doesn't want to do anything, they're going to stay where they're at, right? And same with 9-ball, you get to a 7, 8, or a 9, if you're wanting to get better at the game, you're going to move up to a better league. Not a better league, just a one with more competitiveness in it, right? I don't even know if that's a good word because they're all competitive, right? It's what the player wants out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think when you to kind of summarize that, it's kind of when you walk into a pool hall, what's the energy in the room? And I think with UPA, APA, it's more jovial, it's more just relaxed. Let's have a beer and let's poke at some balls, right? And that's typically how it is. And you'll have on each team, you'll typically have a couple of the players who are like really,
driven to play.
Yeah.
Well, and also when you get to a higher level in APA, the rule formats that APA uses in itself kind of limit your growth as a player because they're taking away aspects of the game. 9-ball, for example, you're getting those points per ball. You're not really playing 9-ball. You can't use a jump cue in APA, which limits an ability to be a great player.
You can't roll out.
You can't push out. You can't use a 3 foul. It's slot play in 8-ball. So there's a lot of things that it kind of equals the playing field for lower level players against players that are trying to grow and get better. Right? I think all skill levels can still play APA, but it's just about what you want. Do you want to play a more competitive game of pool and grow your game past what an APA 6 or 7 would even be?
But it also limits your players. Once you become a 7 or a 9 in the league, you're limited to how much you can play.
Yeah.
Because me being a 9 in 9-ball, I'm taking up 9 of the 23 points. So now you are playing the 3s and the 4s so you can hit that 23 cap.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it hurts that player. Because now, I play once and let's sit out for the next month, so the other players can play.
And in general, there's not a lot of good competition in those leagues for a player like yourself. Any player that's a 7 or a 9 in the APA, I feel like there's not a lot of competition in the league because not a lot of teams have those players.
Exactly.
So now you end up playing lower players, which is no fun for either of you.
Right.
A 4 doesn't want to play you, and you don't want to play a 4. You want to play a competitive game on both sides.
Yeah.
I was just going to say for higher skill levels, higher ranked players, there's also the coaching aspect.
Yes.
You have timeouts in APA and you can coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so just like a higher skill level player might enjoy mentoring and coaching people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a fantastic place to be on a team, especially with a lot of lower skill level players. But I mean, like you guys are saying, if they're looking at continuing to grow themselves, then that might get boring after a while. It just depends on your mindset and what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it might be really gratifying to grow a team and be like, yeah, I remember when you couldn't hit, and yeah.
That's a really good point that you brought up, is the fact that it allows more experienced, accomplished players to mentor and coach and help people with the game. I think I played APA total 4 or 5 years, and I would have left a couple years earlier if it wasn't for that fact. So I got a group of friends, said let's play some pool, and no one but myself had ever played pool before. So week 2 came around, there was a 7 on the team and 7 1s. And the team that rolled up to, they just look at the roster and they see 1 level 7 and they see 7 1s.
That's awesome.
And they're like, there's obviously something wrong with the paperwork here. Like, no. So they call us the unicorns until we started getting some of those numbers bumped up. But APA kept me around for another year or two just to help foster new players. I really enjoyed that aspect of that. And then when I was over with that, I was over with the APA. So.
But I remember the first time the Double Jeopardy team that I was in played your team. That was what I remembered. It was like, wow, this team calls a lot of timeouts, and that was unusual from my experience. But I was super jealous because I'm like, look at the learning that's happening here. Why can't my team do timeouts like this? I could learn so much more because you utilize the timeouts. And I thought it was really cool. I think other people on the team might have thought it was annoying because it slowed things down a little bit. But that's how you learn. That's how you learn, and I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great league for that. Just players who are open to wanting the growth. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunity for the higher skilled players to provide
help
that.
them out. Yeah.
We reference these skill levels, especially in these kinds of leagues. The metrics aren't tracked regionally. It's a hyper-local rating system. So you're in a fairly small ecosystem where you're playing your local 4s and 5s or 1s and 2s or 6s and 7s. And a lot of the APA rankings is based off of your win-loss record. I mean, there's other factors that are going there, your misses and makes, but I think a lot of it, APA really wants to see you at a 50% win record. So if you're above 50% win record and you keep there, you're going to keep leveling up until you start getting near that 50% win record, and that's where they want you, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
So with that said, and I've heard this from a lot of people, when they finally get to like a nationals tournament where you're now in the mixing pot with people from all over the nation, they sense there's a mismatch when they're supposed to be equal skill level, right? They're ranked the same, but there's clear divides in a lot of the matches.
Yeah, and then they'll move them in the middle of it.
Yeah, they can, spontaneously get ranked up by refs. Yeah.
I've seen in that whole regard of these skill levels being hyper regional, I've seen people that play in 2 counties that are next to each other. They play in both counties and there'll be a different skill level in each county. It's the same league.
Yeah.
We're talking about an APA player in Pierce County and an APA player in King County, and they're 5 miles apart. And I'm a 6 over here and a 7 over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely influenced by just the people you're playing against. And you hear that all the time when these APA players go to Vegas. Our local players almost always complain about East Coast players being extremely more competitive players than ours.
That's what I've always felt too, and heard as well.
And that's what I've heard. And it's more of, I think, because I've played in Vegas for years, and I've played people from all over the world, and finding people from the East Coast, there's more pool rooms on the East Coast. There's more people playing pool. There's more competitiveness going on.
A lot more 9-foot tables, which I think tends to make
up their games.
A higher level player too.
Yeah.
So to take that full circle, essentially what Jeff is saying is that if you have a stronger pool of players, their ranks they're not going to be as high because they're not winning as much against the same high level players, and so nobody's really getting bumped up too much because they're fighting tooth and nail.
Yeah.
If they're both 5s and they're really great, they're going to do that. Whereas, here that 5 comes over here where there's less competitive, higher accomplished players. They might be matched to one of our 7s. Playing their 5, right? It could potentially be that dramatic.
It's strange that it is dramatic like that, though, because of the way most of these handicap systems and these skill ratings are supposed to work. It's supposed to be based on how well you played the game.
Yeah.
So if I didn't miss a single shot in a rack of 8-ball, I ran out the table for 3 racks, how can that be a different rating than a guy on the East Coast that does the same, right? It should be the same thing.
Do either one of you want to take a crack at, we've just kind of established a 3 is a 3-ish, right? Do you guys want to take a stab at, just for people who aren't familiar with APA skill levels and how that might correlate to Fargo ratings? Like rough numbers, ballpark numbers for people to understand?
Rough number, 3 in Fargo rating would probably be mid 200s, maybe. Get to a 5, you're probably sitting around 400.
Okay.
Somewhere right in there. 7. And there's the other thing with APA and the rating system. We could both be 7s or 9s, right?
Yeah.
But what's your Fargo rating?
490.
490, and I'm at 650.
Yeah, because once you're topped out.
So once you're topped out,
Yeah. There's no 7 plus.
Yeah, this is right. So that's what
7 plus
hinders
plus.
that situation. So a 7 in APA can range from 4 to whatever.
Yeah.
7s
are scary because you have like you said, you have no idea. They could be a 500, they could be a 700.
Yeah.
Monster.
Yeah. You have no idea.
Okay, so let's get into the next one in BCA.
Okay.
And this was my natural progression as I played APA, and as I was transitioning out of APA, I found BCA. On my personal journey, I just needed something a little bit more serious, more than anything, a little bit more competitive, and I wanted the players that I was always approaching to be more or less closer to my skill level, and doing the same. And so that's the next one that I found. How about you guys?
It was definitely BCA.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I was playing VNEA, the next thing that was coming into play was BCA. So I jumped right into BCA.
BCA was the next for me after APA, and at the time my main focus was a lot the same, as I wanted to play better players. And at the time when I went to BCA, almost everybody in that league was better than me, and some by a long shot. That's, however, changed quite a bit since back then, but at the time, yeah, I was probably in the bottom 25% of that league. That, and I think the other reason, one of the main reasons I went to BCA after APA is I knew that the nights were much shorter in BCA, and
Very
I was tired of playing till midnight.
And not knowing if you're gonna play.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we can get into that in a second. So what about you?
UPA.
Oh, you went APA to UPA?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was because you were starting a Friday night team,
Oh, okay.
and asked if I wanted to be on the team, and I was like, okay.
You did ultimately play BCA as well.
Yeah,
though.
Yeah.
and then went to BCA.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was always feeling like I was struggling to keep my head above water, and if I won 1 or 2 matches, it was like, woohoo, yay me. So getting used to losing was fun.
But that's what makes you better.
That's what Matt kept saying.
You're gonna get tired of losing, and then you'll start figuring it out.
Well, you definitely learn more watching higher skilled players play, especially because things like slop aren't involved. I mean, calling
Or
every single
even
pocket.
playing against them.
Calling every single pocket.
When you're playing an APA, generally, and we brought this up, is you generally are going to play somebody close to your own skill level. So my competition, I never really got to learn much from my competition, and I wasn't really challenged. I could shoot well, or I could shoot so-so and still win. But when I got to BCA, another reason I wanted to go there, because I knew most of the time I was going to play players that were much better than me, and I was going to have to play my A game to have a chance at winning.
Yeah. So going back to that, when you walk in the pool hall, contrasting the APA versus the BCA, there's a different energy. I think more people are more focused. They're more nose down. They're there more to play pool than to do a social hour.
Yeah,
is
definitely.
Is what I would say.
Definitely.
You talked about an earlier night, and that's boils down to the format, right? How many players are playing, what you're doing, and stuff like that. So in BCA, they play 8-ball, 9-ball, and 10-ball are options. They're not going to offer necessarily all of them in your area, but they're going to offer one of those 3 formats.
They even have more than that, honestly.
Do they?
There's straight pool that gets played in BCA.
Is there? Okay.
Up north, they're even doing a Moscone team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still 8-ball and 10-ball, I think, but it's a Moscone type format every
situation,
night.
Yeah. So it's a highly customizable league set up for league operators to really have the freedom that they want.
Yep.
So
Singles, or there's also singles BCA leagues where you're
Okay.
not even playing teams, you're just playing singles.
Yeah.
well, I guess we can throw out an example so we've got some kind of foundation to work on. And for me at least, it was the local 9-ball BCA league where we played 3-man teams.
Yep.
And meaning you could have more people on your roster. How many could you have? 6?
6. You can
Yeah.
in BCA, at least in Doug's BCA, and this
Yes.
again, I don't know if carries across. You could have twice what you throw. So if you throw 3, you can have 6. If you throw 4, which now you do an 8-ball, you can have 8.
Okay. So in this particular 9-ball league, we could have a 6-man roster. We played sets of 4 racks, and you'd play each of their 3 players 4 racks
games.
apiece.
Yes.
So no matter what, it wasn't a race. It was you're playing 4 racks against player A, player B, and player C.
Correct.
Yeah. And you know who's going to play, you know when you're going to play, and it's an alternating rotation thing, right? So you'll play the first set, and then your other teammates will play theirs, and then you'll play yours, and so on and so forth.
It's important to point out, though, that that's 4 racks. It's not a race to 4.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
It's
Yeah,
not
it's
races.
4
It's,
racks.
it's 4 racks,
4
regardless
racks.
of the win-losses. 4 racks.
Which, to my knowledge, is the only league that plays like that. All other leagues are playing some race.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there's pros and cons to it. It's nice because it's just a guaranteed format. You kind of know what's going to happen, but at the same time, I felt it did take a little bit of the competitive edge off. I mean, you always want to win, but win-loss, you're still going to play another rack or another 5 racks or whatever it is, right? It's a set number of racks. But I did feel that the average level of player was higher in BCA than it was in APA.
Yeah.
Notable things you guys enjoyed about BCA.
Being able to go to Vegas without having to qualify and do the regional tournaments like APA.
So to summarize that, so you don't need to do any tournaments to win a ride to Vegas.
No.
If you're an active BCA participating player member, You
get your 8 weeks in, and you're good to go play in the regional or Vegas.
And you can put together any team you like instead of just the team you've played with all year long during league. And most of these other leagues, that's the team you have to travel to these national tournaments.
You have to take 3 original players from your team, if I remember right.
No, that's APA.
Just from your league.
Yeah, it's just your league.
Just your league.
Yeah.
But
not from your team, though, for BCA. You can just take a team as long as everybody is in the same
your league. Yeah.
I always liked the fact that I was going to get to play multiple people every night, too. I wasn't going to just get to play one person. However, I do prefer race pool. The BCA with the play 4 racks against somebody is probably my least favorite thing about BCA. I want to play a race against somebody, but you certainly can't do that against 3-4 players. But it is nice to be able to play. I always knew I was going to get to play guys like Jeff Jerome. Even when I was a 425, I'm going to get to play that 650 and take a shot at that. You know,
one game is all it takes in BCA. You know,
it made it nice for me in BCA because I can play against a guy and I know if I don't run out, I'm not going to win this.
Yeah. So you quickly shot right into it. I don't even know if I realized at the beginning. You just immediately transitioned gears into Fargo ratings. Whereas APA had skill levels. Yeah, we just went right into it, right?
Fargo rating.
Yeah. And
everybody out there is going, what's Fargo?
Yeah.
And that handicap works completely different than it does in other leagues at any rate.
Yeah. And again, I think because we just acknowledge the fact that league operators can set up their BCA leagues custom the way they want, I still think just for some kind of context, we should just illustrate the ways ours worked around here. Yeah. So your team was not skill capped, which is a huge bonus if you want to have a team. You don't have to be forced to split it at some point because you're fighting some kind of skill cap. But more often than not, I believe the league operators will still try to create some kind of fairness in the sense that there will be what we call weight, or would it be a handicap?
It is a handicap.
It's a handicap.
It was a total team handicap. It wasn't for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a total team of, you guys got this many points for Fargo ratings, and this team has this many points for Fargo ratings, and now we have to spot them a bazillion points to win the night.
Yeah.
So that's where the difference comes in.
Yeah, so they take the 3 combined Fargos, and depending on the disparity between the two, the system spits out a number of racks that they get as an advantage, as bonus sweeteners, I think, right? Because it wasn't like you don't lose rack opportunity, they just gain some.
Yeah, the lower rated team gets.
And that's who wins at the end of the night with that added into.
Correct.
Because again, it's not a race, it's a total rack, 36 racks for the 9-ball format that we played into. So if they had 5 handicap racks, that was added on top. So you had to overcome that.
Right. So your individual matches, there's no handicap, and you're just playing. And the results of that are all that go towards our skill levels.
Your team,
in the future.
Your team handicap.
And then at the end of the night, that team handicap applies to the match, but the skill level has nothing to do with those handicaps, doesn't know anything about who ran 5 balls, who missed balls, nothing else. Your skill level is only based on a win-loss. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, so kind of looping back, the Fargo rating is an interconnected system, whereas the APA is an isolated regional thing, where your skill levels can be highly based off of just your local talent. Fargo is a worldwide interconnected system, so all it takes is Julieta to hop down to Arizona and play a few racks, and now everyone that she's played in this area gets compared to everyone down in the players that she played down in Arizona, and that just spider webs out and keeps going, right? So it's a much more robust integrated system. Is there better words for that to describe how Fargo works? So every rack that you play, in the way that Fargo is tracked, it's not about ball runs or missed balls or
just wins,
jumps or whatever breaking runs. It's literally just racks won. That's all the system sees, is whether you won racks, even.
And then depending on the person you played, right? Because it knows that person's Fargo rating and my Fargo rating. So now if I lose to a low-rated player, just even one game, Fargo's going to see that, right? And know that, you shouldn't have lost that game, right? Whether or not, somebody had an off night or whatever, Fargo doesn't know that. They just know that that person lost that game.
So Fargo doesn't know if I won as a lower rated player because the other
has
person
no idea.
accidentally
Nope.
hit the 8 in early.
Right,
Or something
has no
like that.
idea. It just knows.
That's what I meant by I didn't win, the other person lost.
Yeah,
but
Fargo
then my
doesn't.
Fargo goes up.
Fargo doesn't know that. Fargo just knows that you won the game.
And I think APA does factor that in. If you didn't
Oh, very much so.
truly win,
yeah.
if you won by default versus actually winning with your skill.
Because all your stats are there, right?
Yeah.
But all Fargo sees is a win-loss. That's
Yeah.
all that it
Yeah.
sees.
So do any of you have experience then going to a tournament in another part of the country and comparing those Fargo ratings? Kind of like we were talking about APA. We feel like maybe we're overrated here when we go to those.
I think Fargo is the closest to even across the
It does
country,
seem-
and nothing's perfect. You can still get kind of little micro pockets and everything else, but you had mentioned that you didn't think that Fargo, you thought it had that problem still local, but I completely disagree because there's several people, not everybody, but a lot of the players in our area travel.
Okay.
They go to Vegas, they go to Lincoln City. And then when they come back, whether you know they'd been there or not, they've played a lot of different people from other regions, and people traveled to those. So now you've essentially played those people
It's
too,
all-
because you've played me
Averaged in.
and I've played them, right?
Yeah,
so it's all interweaved.
Big spider web.
And I don't know if you guys have noticed this. If you track your Fargo regularly enough, sometimes, and if you have a favorites list, there's a favorites list there, so you can track people that you follow. Sometimes you'll see everyone jump 1 or 2 points that you followed, and because they're from your local areas, that meant somebody went somewhere, did something good or bad,
Something, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And again, there's that spider web coming back and making those ripples
Mine
through the
jumped
system.
the point yesterday, and I hadn't played since last week. It had already made an adjustment from playing league, and I didn't do anything, and it moved a point.
Yeah, but to answer your question, I was just down in Vegas in March playing the BCA Nationals. I think it was March, something like that.
Yeah, sure.
And everyone I played, it felt pretty spot. I didn't play something like, oh man, that guy. I didn't play a 600. I didn't think
It
he was a
playing
5 or a
way
7.
over his head or
Of course,
something like
Yeah,
that.
everyone's got the ability to play above and below their
you can
speed,
have 50
right?
point swing either way in your play, right?
But I felt it was pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt really, really sharp.
Yeah, and pressure plays a lot in that too.
Yes.
You go to Vegas and play, and now you got that pressure of being in Vegas and playing, and all of a sudden, your 7 is playing like a 5 because he doesn't know how to play under the pressure.
And then
You
some
know?
guys relish it and they shoot way above
Lights
their
out.
level.
Yeah.
Or they've been there for a decade, and this is that guy's
It
first
just doesn't
time,
affect
right?
them.
Like,
Yeah.
there's all
Yeah.
that stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
So how do you get your initial rating to play in BCA? But for our league, there's a minimum entry of a 400.
So if you have 0 Fargo history, you're going into BCA, your start is a 400 for our area.
For our area.
Yeah.
But that again is up to league operators.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the league operator knew when I joined that I was in APA, asked what my skill level was in APA. I told him I was a 4, and he said okay, and he gave me a 375.
Yeah.
Okay, so good for the UPA coverage now?
Yeah.
So same thing, league operator will want to play, just hit some balls with you, and they can tell really fast, just basically your speed based off of just shot selection, the shape play, if you got any, things like that. I think they play usually 1 or 2 racks, and then Jesse was just like, yeah, we're good.
See, I don't like that UPA skill level, especially when they use that with players that are established in other leagues. I had that play against this player. I'm like, why? I have an APA, a TAP, and a Fargo. What, you can't tell me what my skill level is based on that?
Yeah.
You want me to play a rack with you where I could
Just
shoot the
terrible.
best game I've shot in my life,
Or
I
rattle
could
everything I want to.
rattle everything, or I could even manipulate
Yeah.
how I shoot and not shoot as good as I'm capable of.
Yeah.
It seemed like the worst way to actually establish a skill level for a player, but
Yeah, I think she took in our previous ranks too, like in
she?
other leagues. I think she I know she asked me that stuff. So back to a skill level ranking system in UPA, and another skill cap situation. And again, another reason why we got skill capped out.
Yep.
That was the most aggressive leveling I'd encountered. So out of the 4 players that we had on our team, we on average, every week, skill ranked 1.5 points somewhere on our team.
Yeah.
Every week, our team went up 1.5 points.
Yeah, in 2 sessions, we were to the point where our top players couldn't play both 8 and 10, and so then that's not fun for them anymore.
Yeah.
So we ended up.
Yeah, because the cap was unusually low in that. The skill
Like
ratings
17 or
are
something.
1 to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 1 to 10, and you were probably a 9 when you left.
I think I was 8-9. Yeah.
9. And your cap to play 3 players is only 18.
Yeah.
That doesn't leave a lot when you have an 8 or a 9 on your team. I mean,
Yeah.
The amount of time I would get to play for the amount of money I had to pay. And granted, none of these amounts of money are a lot, right? It's pretty cheap. It's for all of them. None of them are going to break the bank. But I felt like for UPA, I got the least amount of playing time for my dollar. Because I would get, as a lower ranked player, 2 or 3 racks.
Yeah.
And I'd be done.
and you paid
I'd be
$10
done. And I was
to
like,
play
okay.
2 racks.
Yeah. And with BCA, I always got the full 12. Regardless of how good or bad I was, I always got the full 12.
You got to play.
UPA usually is a pretty quick night too.
It was a quick night.
UPA scoring a little bit more in depth. That's what I really enjoyed about UPA. There was more insight. It tracked every shot.
single ball.
It wasn't just a miss or make. If it was a defense, if your opponent was able to successfully escape that defense or not, how many balls you're making on the break, all of that stuff was tracked, and they had a website where you can get in there and see all that stuff, which was nice. And you actually literally were getting scored based off of each discipline of the shot type. So
Yeah,
I liked
yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And the defense I really liked because they didn't just keep track of your defense. They kept track of whether your defense was successful.
Right.
And then when you got a defense played against you, whether you were successful in getting out of a defense.
What considers a successful defense?
Unfortunately, only a foul goes as a successful.
Yeah,
it should be a miss too, but it isn't.
Well, I mean, I can leave somebody end to end, right? Put one ball on the one rail and one on the other rail, and that's a defense to a lot of players.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
and it's a good defense.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that bothers me about that stat because I look at mine and I'm like, are you kidding me? That was a great defense, and I got what I wanted out of it. But as far
And
as
even
they
if
were
they hit the
concerned,
ball, you still did what you were supposed to do.
yeah, I
So,
forced them to. Not
yeah,
have
they're
the
not
shot they
having
could
a
make.
shot.
Yeah, you may not have gotten ball in hand, but they didn't progress, and you got the ball back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for stat nerds, it's a fun aspect of it, I
It is,
think.
but it's
Yeah.
a pain in the butt to keep score.
Yeah, you have to be
right?
on it.
And you have to have somebody there again. You have to have somebody that's not a low-rated player keeping stats, so they're paying attention to.
Yeah.
Or every time you shoot a shot, hey, that was a safety.
Yeah.
You know.
Which I remember people doing when we were.
Yeah.
People would.
What I
Or they
liked
would
about
ask to verify, was that a save?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't tell sometimes.
right.
That's true. Was that
What
just
I
a
liked about their
really
score
terrible
sheets, though,
shot?
you could look at your score sheet after a match, and it was like having a recording of your match. You saw everything you did in the order that it happened in.
Yeah.
Right. I made 3 shots. I played safe. He called a timeout. I must have played a good safe. Then he made the hit. Maybe it wasn't so good after, and you just see the entire match. That was kind of cool. It's like having a recording.
So UPA, who's it best suited for, not suited for?
Mid-range?
You know, I haven't played it enough.
Okay.
I think it can suit anybody, honestly. I think it's similar to APA in the range of players that play it. It just adds in the no slop, and you can bring out a jump cue, so that's beneficial, I guess, a little bit to higher level players.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Julieta probably more on this just because we experienced it pretty heavily, is that within 2 sessions we had to divide our team because of a skill cap. So I would say it favors mid to maybe medium high, but nothing once you start getting up there.
Maybe because of that, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious if that's a local issue or if that's a nationwide issue.
Yeah, because again, all we can do is have our stats of the people that we're playing. It's not a Fargo integrated system, right? So
Yeah,
am I
you're
really
just-
an 8 everywhere, or am I a 5 everywhere? you
Yeah,
know?
right. I'm an 8 here, but I'm a 3 over there on the East
Yeah.
Coast. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So interesting. So they have national tournaments for UPA.
So UPA does have national, and they do assist those teams that win at the end like APA does.
I would be interested, if anybody watches this, I'd be interested to get feedback on what their thoughts were when they did play people from other parts of the nation for UPA rankings. Because I have received 0 feedback on how the different regions compare and stack up.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear that too. I did hear from somebody that went to Vegas for UPA 10 ball, and they were amazed that they were only really competing against like 12 other teams. Yeah. And this is going to Vegas. But keep in mind that was for 10 ball.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, like, yeah, we have 10 ball, but in UPA, I don't think that's a very common practice.
I don't think the national level is where they want it yet. Yeah. I was reading something today that they're just not. APA and BCA are obviously the two biggest for national level for Vegas. UPA is still like way down here money wise for Vegas.
So talk to us about TAP, Rob. Like, what's the structure?
So TAP is, I typically, when people have played these other leagues, I always say TAP is a combination of APA and BCA. It's BCA type rules. We can use jump cues. We play call pocket. 9 ball is traditional 9 ball. It's for the 9. That's all that matters. There's push outs.
Is it a race?
And you play, but then you go to more like APA in that we have a roster of 8 players and we play 5 a night, and you play a handicapped race against one other player. So the throw becomes much more, or almost exactly like APA, in where the captain will throw first and the other captain will respond, and those 2 players will play a handicapped race. You're a 7, I'm a 5. In 9 ball, you would go to 7, I would go to 5. In 8 ball, it's a little bit different, but
the races naturally, like you just mentioned, suit your skill level. Where the downside of the UPA is if 2 8s were playing, we're still racing to 4, which is silly.
Yeah.
In TAP, you have the races suit the skill levels very well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, we're back to a skill level. The only league that we're talking about tonight that integrates the Fargo system, unfortunately, is BCA right now.
Right.
So back to skill level. I think Rob brought me onto his TAP team, but told me a little bit about it. And naturally, if you're to compare TAP to APA, a skill level 5 in APA isn't going to be a skill level in 5 in TAP necessarily. It's going to be a rung or 2 lower.
Yeah.
So they typically will rate that same player a little bit lower rank in TAP.
Is it capped?
It's still capped, but the cap is higher than an APA cap. I don't think we even brought up the APA cap, but
we did. We didn't get into hard numbers,
what
but
the number was. I don't even remember what the APA number
23.
is.
23. Yeah.
Is it 23?
Yeah.
So TAP is 25 then.
Yes.
And you have to remember that in TAP, like you already alluded to, the APA players in general are going to be they're going to be a lower level number in TAP. So that's 2 extra points, and you have much stronger players on the TAP roster with those 2 extra points.
Yeah. So with the given rankings being lower in TAP, you can have a much higher accomplished team in terms of skill level. It's going to be higher level of competition for any given skill level.
It's the perfect segue for an APA team that has run into that, where we all grew too much in our handicaps and we can't even throw and meet the handicap anymore. Oh, you can keep that exact same roster and go over to TAP and have no problem.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about it like that, where your team grows out of APA. They're all to a point where they want the next best thing.
Yeah.
That migration would seem pretty natural. 5, did we get into this? 5 matches per discipline?
5 matches in 8, 5 and 9. They do have 10 ball available, but we don't play it locally. So you do have timeouts again?
Yeah.
Like you would have an APA. Actually, even better than APA. So we didn't talk about an APA. Lower level players, 3 and lower, get 2 timeouts.
4 and up get 1.
In TAP, everybody gets 2 timeouts. Jeff gets 2 timeouts if he wants them.
And they've got the Uber play with level 2s. You can coach them from the sidelines 100% of the time.
2s get 2 timeouts. A coach approaching the table, but they can be talked to from the sideline the entire game.
Yeah. Which, fortunately, we didn't encounter too much of that getting like crazy abuse and slowing things down.
You don't see a lot of abuse of it, but you will see, and I think it's a great aspect to TAP also, because you have 2s. Those are in TAP especially. Those are brand new players, and you need to be able to just kind of tell them, hey, play safe here, and that's all you're saying. Hey, don't shoot that ball, shoot this ball. real
And
quick.
that's not a timeout. That's
That's
just
not a timeout. But that's
'Cause
only
you
for a
didn't-
skill level 2.
Because you didn't approach the table.
Yeah.
You just suggested something.
So similar format in terms of amounts of games and racks played-ish with APA. Same scenario, you don't know when you're going to play. You could be pulling your 6 out at 7 or 11. So it's typical, similar length of evening.
Yeah, almost identical to APA. You expect a late night when you play tap. One thing we didn't talk about is like nights of play. Like APA is available 5 nights a week. Tap is available 5 nights a week. UPA 4 or 5, I think.
This can be a regionally based decision, right?
But BCA has
Yeah.
the least available nights, right? There's not
Here.
a lot of available nights, at least for us. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we want to take this full circle, and if you had to pick one league to play, what would you play and why? Not just like maybe a quick summary of why it's your favorite.
I have to pick one.
Yes.
Tap.
I was going to say he's going tab. I'm going BCA.
BCA, I really, ideally, I want to be playing tap and BCA, but if I had to pick one, I'd stick with tap at least currently
Really?
right now.
All right.
Just because I don't get to play enough in BCA.
Okay.
I want to play that race, and in BCA, the most I'm going to play is 6 racks.
12. If
Well,
you play 9 ball.
9 ball, yeah. But which
Oh,
is
you're
a
playing
whole
eight.
nother thing for me that we didn't really bring up is all these leagues that we've talked about. They have a skill level for 8 ball, a skill level for 9 ball, a skill level for 10 ball. Whereas BCA, you have one skill level.
your Argo.
Well, and BCA doesn't even own the skill level that it's not even associated to BCA, right? It's a
Yeah.
whole separate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so tap.
anyways, BCA.
Why BCA?
Just the Vegas thing.
Okay.
Even though I haven't been to Vegas in years, you know.
Yeah.
I'd probably pick BCA for just it's guaranteed number of racks. You know your evening. You know when you're going to play. You're not sitting there for 3 hours
And you're not.
going out of your mind, and then Matt, you're up. Like okay. Like,
Or it's 11 o'clock, you know,
Yeah.
when BCA gets done at 9.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big swing for a lot of people that work. So,
And you know something we didn't really hit on. Now that I'm thinking about it, is in the BCA format that we play, you play all the players on the team that night, and there will typically be a range of lower, mid, and a higher player. And it is interesting sometimes to test your game against those different skill levels. Julia, what's your pick?
Kind of like Rob said, it's hard to pick. Right now, I'm only in APA, and because I'm, a middle of the road player, that works for me. I get a lot of playing time. I'm on Double Jeopardy. I get to play 8 and 9 every night because I'm a valuable player because of my skill level. Because I'm very
Yeah, I mean it's a very adaptable.
adaptable.
Yeah.
Adaptable.
Right there in the middle.
Right in the middle.
It-
So then, I
Yeah.
can play higher rank players, lower rank
What-
players, whatever. I will say when I've had the opportunity to be, I haven't been in TAP, but when I've been in BCA and UPA, those are the times where my skill level in APA went up because I did learn.
Yeah.
It pushed me and I learned and I got better. And when I'm not on other teams, and I don't know how much I can attribute that to that I'm playing more than one night a week because I do practice outside of league. I don't think it's from that. I think it's from the actual competition and watching other people play, not just being beat, but watching 2 people play because I'm keeping score or whatever. Just watching the defenses, watching the choices people make. You learn so much from that because, your actual skill, your ability to hit a ball is only half of it. Your choices are the other half. As the teacher would probably tell me, like, shut up, you're not the teacher. But those are the kind of things I learned in the higher level. BCA and UPA are higher level. So that was incredibly valuable for me. But then I love APA because I've been on my same team for years and they're like almost like family at this point. And it's just, it's a different feel. It's a different vibe.
different
It's
vibe,
a little
yeah.
more relaxed,
Yeah.
So that's the camaraderie there. And when you play with like BCA or UPA, there is no tournament. So you either win or you're not in first or second place and you don't win any money. So I feel like there's less sandbagging in those, which is nice because then you're actually playing the real person and not somebody who's just kind of slamming balls around because they don't want to win anymore because they don't want their skill level to go up.
Well, that whole thing with the sandbagging is you've got a captain that doesn't want you to get better because he doesn't want your rating to go up.
Yep, I've
There's
heard
that,
captains
too.
tell
Yeah.
people like, "Hey, slow down." when they're on fire one night. Like
Yeah.
you literally just told your person to not play so well.
Yeah, and I
Out
think
loud,
that's
in
the
front of
problem
everybody.
with APA.
Yep.
And
Right?
sometimes
That's frustrating.
it's just because a team doesn't want to get separated, right? They're all friends and family, and they don't want to not play together. And it's like, hey, if we go up, we're gonna have to break this team up. And then other times there's more motivation. than
Yeah,
that,
it's
like you've already
it's a
talked
vicious
about.
circle for APA.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Cole, what do you think, buddy? What's your favorite? Well, I think I really want to have this conversation because you can see this conversation went way longer than I thought it ever would, and it really kind of unfolded all the things that are involved in every league, and there truly are, pros and cons to each one of
Every
them.
one of them.
Yeah, and why you'd want to play them. And I've played all the ones we've talked about tonight, and there's a reason why, and I'm glad that I have. They all gave me something different or taught me something different on an individual or a team level. So.
Yeah, it was interesting when you sent me the text on all the stuff we were going to talk about. I actually Googled, pros and cons of playing UPA, pros and cons of playing APA, and you should read the stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
There's bashing of every league there
You
is.
get a lot of hate. I try not to hate on any league because they all have their good points to them.
And their bad points.
Yeah.
They all do.
And I think that's the goal here is for anybody watching this is to, okay, do I want to try this? What's it all about? I think this is a really quick, easy way to get up to speed on what it could potentially offer them and why they may or may not enjoy that particular league. So rather than them hopping in like, oh no, this isn't my flavor. So this might give them a little bit more insight on
Maybe
what they
where
could
to
expect.
start. Yeah.